Profile is presented by INS Group, Insurance and Benefits. Today on Profile, John Daugherty, President and CEO, John Daugherty Realtors. Who is John Daugherty Jr.?
I'm just a good old boy that grew up in Houston, Texas, and fortunately grew up in a great city. Well, I had the most wonderful childhood. I tell Debbie that all the time, my friends, that I wouldn't trade my childhood for anything in the world. My father was in what they then called the oil field supply business. Today you call that the energy service business. And Daddy grew up on the north side of Houston, went to St. Thomas High School, started when he was 14 years old working for National Supply Company on navigation, and working part-time, and stayed in the oil field supply business all his life. Back in those days, he retired in 1960, but back in the days when he was in that business, they didn't move around the world like they do today. But he did leave Houston in 1935 and went to Tulsa. And Tulsa was the oil capital of the world back in those days, and he stayed there for 12 years and came back to Houston in 1947. And then we stayed in Houston ever since then. And so I'm so fortunate that we didn't move around, because for my business it's been very helpful to have been growing up in Houston and going to the schools in Houston like I have.
And what did you want to be when you grew up?
I don't want to grow up. I'm having too much fun. I got real lucky, and after I was in the 60s, we still had the draft back in those days, so I was in college for 5 years. And I couldn't go to school anymore, so I had to get my active duty behind me, and I was fortunate enough to get in the Air National Guard, and I was in there with President Bush and a lot of great people out at Ellington Air Force Base. And then I was trying to figure out what I was going to do when I finished my active duty, and I really didn't think about residential sales for some reason, because back in those days, all the people I knew were ladies that were in their 60s and 70s, and I was 21 years old, and I was having trouble relating to a 60-year-old lady. I can relate to them today, but I couldn't then. And so, and I didn't think about commercial real estate, because commercial back in the 60s, you had to wait two or 3 years of hard work before you made any money, and didn't have the staying power. So one weekend, my parents had a very close friend that their son was being ordained a priest. And we were raised Catholics, and I'd never been to an ordination for a priest. And it was a weekend festivity, and about 70% of it was cocktail parties, and 30% of it was ceremony. And there was a young man there that was about 10 years older than I was, by the name of Jimmy Jacks. And Jimmy had a small residential or real estate firm. He had graduated from Rice. He was an ex-football player there, and very much of a man's man. And we hit it off, and 2 weeks later, he offers me a job to go in the residential real estate business. And I said, Jimmy, I think this is really something I want to do. It clicked. I said, I don't want to come under any false pretenses. I'll be here for a year, knocking on your door, wanting to go out on my own or wanting to buy in. He says, come on. So a little less than a year later, I woke up in the middle of the night and say, hey, I need to go to work and build my business. So I started my company in March of 1967. It's hard to believe I've been in it for 43 years.
That's a big step, and that's a big risk, to go out and say, okay, I'm gonna do this on my own now. And I'm going to go and I'm going to put my name out there and start my own business. What gave you the courage and kind of the the ability to take that risk?
My dad retired in 1960, and I graduated from high school in 1962. The day I graduated from high school, my daddy had a massive stroke and was paralyzed on his right side, lost 90% of his speech. And I was supposed to go to Menlo Junior College out on the West Coast. So I canceled that. I was the only child and stayed home to help him, because he had to do therapy for the next 3 or 4 years to really get back to where he could walk again and start talking again. And so, being an only child, I needed to be there to help him. So that really, when that happened to me when I was 18 years old, there's always good out of every bad that happens, and I always look for the good out of it. And the good was, it helped me grow up a little faster, because I grew up as an only child, and my parents did everything possible to spoil me rotten, and I was. And all of a sudden, the real world hit me when I was about 20 years old. I said, I got to go to work if I want to continue having the nice life that my parents gave me. And fortunately, I had some great success my first year with Jimmy. And interesting enough, when I went in to tell Jimmy I wanted to go on my own, he was totally supportive of me. And he said, and for the next 4 or 5 years, I didn't know what I was doing. The first person I'd call on the phone to get help was Jimmy, and he was always there for me. And one of the greatest honors that ever happened to me, about 14 years ago, Jimmy joined me and joined our family and our company, and retired about 2 years ago. And he's still one of my best friends, and just, we've always had a special love for each other.
When you do go out on your own and you name a business, you know, after yourself, and now you've been in business as many years as you have, how have you just built that brand, and what do you think it really stands for?
Well, we've stayed focused. We were niche marketing before we knew the word niche marketing. When I started the company back in 1967, we were specialized in River Oaks, Tanglewood, what we then called close-in Memorial, in the museum area. And after being in business for several years, we saw that we needed to expand that and get into areas like Briar Grove Park, further out Memorial, West U, Southampton, and we began moving outwards because we wanted to attract the young couple that was buying their first home, sell them a home, and then work up with them. And we stayed very focused. But if you could, one word still more important to me is integrity. I've always told my salespeople, if you can't put it on top of the table, I don't want anything to do with it. And that's the most important thing to me. And I always say, another thing I always say, give your heart, which is your best. If you do that, the rest will fall in place. And don't worry about making money in this business. If you give your best, the money will flow in behind you.
How difficult was this at the beginning to start generating momentum and wearing all the different hats? How difficult was it to get this company kind of off the ground, and the people that weren't there at the lean earlier times, and they're just looking in now and saying, oh, it makes it look easy. But what was it like really for you back then?
And I had this dear friend of my parents that my mother grew up with in Orange, Texas. His name was Chester Grubbs. And when my daddy got sick, he couldn't take me, we couldn't go hunting. Now, we used to love to duck hunt and dove hunt, and fish. And so Chester had a daughter, so he didn't have a son, so he kind of adopted me as his son when I was about 18 years old. And we did a lot of fishing and hunting together while I was going to college. And so when I decided to start my own business, I went to see Chester. And I said, Chester, I'm going to start my own business. He says, where are you going to office? I said, I don't know. He says, well, go across the hall. And he had a little small office building on Wall Drive. I remember 1612 Wall Drive. And then I called the phone company to get a phone put in, and they said they wanted a $500 deposit. I said, a what? I didn't have $500, so I'm back across the hall, and Chester signs up for me, and I'm in business, and that's how I got started. And he said, don't worry about paying the rent for a couple of months. And so without him, I wouldn't be here either. So I give Jimmy Jacks a credit for getting me in the business, but I give Chester Grubbs a credit for helping get me started.